Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. My name is Father Alex Frost. I'm the host of the Godcast. I'm also the vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley, and I'm the author of Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, a priest story, which is available at all Waterstones bookshops and online, Amazon, such like. Do check that out. My guest this week on the Godcast is Reverend Dr. Cris Rogers. Chris is the leader of All Hallows Church in Bow in London. And as part of his doctorate studies, he was exploring the experiences of working class people within the Church of England and why there might be a need for more working class church leaders exploring vocations. So hopefully you will enjoy this informative discussion with Chris now. And if you do, then do check out other Godcasts. There's hundreds of interviews out there, people from the church, people from the media, people from sport and football, authors, actors, you name it. There really is something there for everybody. But for now, I do very much hope you enjoy this Godcast interview with Reverend Dr. Cris Rogers. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Reverend Dr. Cris Rogers, is the leader of All Hallows in Bow. And in the intro, you will have discovered that Chris and I are going to have a conversation about vocations in the Church of England, particularly from the working classes. Chris, it's great to get you on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. I've just had a really nice breakfast with a mate of mine, so I'm doing all right. Good fry up.
Great. Can't beat a fry up to get you going. Um, just let's get down to business. Chris, just give us a bit of context, if you would, to
Yeah.
this subject of working class vocations. Why is it important to you? What motivated you to do this as part of your doctorate? Just explain that to the listeners and viewers,
Yeah.
please.
I think to explain, it starts with where I come from, but it also is where I am now. It's both of these things are a part of this. So growing up in a mining village, West Yorkshire, dad electrician, mum was a hairdresser, also worked in retail, and I was around the church, grew up in the church, but actually really came to faith at 16. Ended up going to Trinity College in Bristol because I really felt like God said, I want you to go do some theology. And bearing in mind, I failed GCSE English. I am dyslexic. So I was an art student. I thought I was going to be doing art and design, filmmaking, something like that. God clearly called me to go to Trinity. When I got to Trinity, I was like, wow, I don't fit. I didn't realize I didn't fit because I grew up in a mining village where everybody was the same as me. And now I'm in a setting where I just didn't fit, and I had to learn how to drop my accent. I had to learn how to behave, how to dress, how to stop wearing big t-shirts that said Ghostbusters on the front or Bart Simpson, and I had to, work out how to wear a shirt and how to be tidy and well dressed. And I found myself change to fit that college, and I what it taught me was how to be bilingual. So I can speak the working class language, but I can speak the middle class language. So that was helpful. So I felt that I entered into a middle class world that I never really understood at the start. So that's a piece of my story. Then where I am now, 15 years we've been in All Hallows Bow on a estate in East London, and we wanted to take this church and revitalize it. And that's what we've done. And we've been able to send a couple of folk to go and revitalize neighboring parishes as well, not with a big strategy, just by sending them with the gospel essentially, and trying to grow leaders where you are. And I realized that I was really struggling to grow leaders from my estate to become lay leaders or to become ordained ministers in the Church of England, because the perception they had was, this isn't for me. That world's not for me, and I don't fit that world. And after about 10 years of really struggling and getting some traction, but not huge amounts of traction, I realized that to see more working class people ordained from my neighborhood, I needed the institution to change, and I needed more representation in the institution. So I could say, look, you can see them there, you can see them there, that's where they are. And often people would say to me, well, Chris, you're not enough. I can see you're in this, but you're not enough because you're like us, but I want to see more than just you in this institution. You've somehow made it work. but I need to see more. So I then was like, oh gosh, I really want, if I want to see, there's 950 estates in the UK with no Christian presence on them. If we want to see working class leaders on those estates, lay and ordained, we need to, systemically change how we discern, train, and deploy working class leaders that fit that call. So from that, I was like, right, this is what I need to research as a part of my doctorate. This is the if I'm going to do something that has some real purpose behind it, I need to not research a random Hebrew phrase and become the master of that. I need to understand why we've gone wrong and where we're going wrong and how we can change the system, the Church of England system, so that we see more working class people get ordained. So it becomes a possible route for them in their lives.
You alluded to feeling unsettled at university, Chris, and in your research, you revealed this perception of working class people, and you said that they were perhaps perceived as a risk, that they were misunderstood, that
Yeah.
they were unconventional, unsuitable, and unappreciated.
Yeah.
These are really kind of negative stereotypes, aren't they? But just unpack that a little bit for me, if you would.
Yeah. So in my research, we had 450 working class individuals who were either in discernment, had been trained, or had been ordained in the last 5 years. And we had a whole bank of words, positive and negative. And we said, look, pick which for you are the significant words that you feel like connect with you. And so this 122 said they felt like they were risky to the Church of England. 119 said they felt misunderstood. 115 said they felt unconventional. 98 said they felt like they were an afterthought. 98 felt that they were hesitantly received. 95 felt they were unsuitable. So the words got unappreciated, needy, skeptically received, ambivalently difficult. And right at the very end, you're looking at 3 people said they felt trusted. 3 working class people felt they felt trusted. 4 said they felt understood. 4 said they felt they were received confidently. So across the board, what we found was in that 450 individuals that filled in that questionnaire, the resounding message was that they felt that they did not fit, that they were not understood, and that the institution were quite skeptical towards them. Now, we have to be honest and say sometimes as working class people, we have a chip on our shoulder. Sometimes we have that, and that may influence our answers. So we have to be honest that some of us, we do have a chip on our shoulder. Some of us have got inverted snobbery. Yes, that may well be me. But at the end of the day, it's a resounding message from all these individuals that they just don't feel like the Church of England understand them and their world. And that really broke my heart to feel like these individuals that are going through discernment and selection feel like they don't fit. I had one individual last year who went on a selection conference, did not get selected. When I pushed why they didn't get selected, I'd put them forward. Why did they not get selected? What it came down to was what they were saying and what was being heard by the selector were 2 different things. They were both trying to get to the same understanding, but it was like culturally, language wise, they were just in 2 different spheres. And the person didn't get selected. And when I pushed them on what was your answer? I was like, oh gosh, I feel like I needed to be in the room and translate for you because you were saying what they wanted, but not in the way that they wanted to hear it. So there's a genuine feeling that people, I just don't fit. I don't feel like I'm understood by the institution, from the discernment through to the training and the colleges, through to DDOs in deployment.
Yeah, do you know what, Chris? There's a couple of things there. I mean, I think you're right that I'm probably guilty of having a chip on my shoulder, but from those statistics that you've just shared, I think there is kind of a justification to have a chip on your shoulder. There's something about if somebody makes you feel that way, then that's how you feel. That's what you are. But I also want to just I was going to ask it later on, but I think there's something in here about educating the educator, isn't there? I think there's a real issue here. What you've just alluded to there is that it is almost like 2 different languages are at play here, and I'm not sure how we overcome that. What do you think?
Right. So I love this. Thank you so much for asking these questions. Right. What we find is that the way a middle class person thinks about the world, how they navigate the world, is different to how a working class person thinks. I get a really good example. A middle class person is defined by their education, what they've achieved. A working class person is defined by the relationships and the status that they have within those relationships. So credibility to a working class person is how are they thought of on their estate, not what's my degree level. They're just not interested. So there's a difference in how they think. And there's many of these, from humor through to dress code, through to how you handle your diary, in terms of what's important to you. So if the person who's leading the discernment group, if the lecturer at the college or the incumbent come from a middle class or upper class world, they see the world functioning in a particular way. And then the working class person comes along with a whole different set of values. And what we essentially say to those working class people is you've got to change your values to match the middle class values of this space. Or we end up saying to them, there's something wrong with you. You're really bad at diary management. So a little thing about the diary. What's interesting is if you value relationship and the importance of relationships over being somewhere on time, which is a middle class value, what you find is if you put something in your diary for 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and you bump into Betty, who's your next door neighbor, and she's actually sick and she needs help, you'll prioritize the relationship over the diary commitment. How that is seen in the middle class world is you're poor with your diary management. No, I've just valued relationship over the diary management. So there's different ways of functioning in the world, and we need to educate those within the institution that when the working class say a particularly, they're not being disrespectful. They're not saying that they can't do something. They're simply saying I have a different value, and therefore the selectors, the trainers, and those like the incumbents need to really understand what is the worldview like of a working class person. What do they value and what do they see as important? And therefore, that would help me understand how I educate and train them, not to change what they value, but to work with it. Because I think at the end of the day, everything that is needed to transform our inner city neighborhoods is found within it. The leaders are found within it. And there's no point changing somebody from an estate to think like the middle class person and then put them back on the estate and wonder why there's a disconnect. They understand their mission field. They understand how the working class function and behave. So therefore we need to educate the educators. So across all my research, the findings were clear. There's a part of the change of the Church of England. We've got to train the selectors, the trainers, and the incumbents on working class behavior, and actually why it's not a problem, actually why it's a real credit and asset to them.
Yeah. Chris, a question I want to ask you is yesterday on X, I quoted some theologians from the 70s, Michael Green, John Pritchard from the 80s and 90s, about the need, what you're talking about, people talking about that. And I just need to find the quote. Oh, you in your research, you quoted from the former Bishop of Liverpool, David Shepherd, who suggested the urban landscape is the new Eden where God is walking with his people. That's great, but he retired as the Bishop of Liverpool in 1997. So I suppose my question is, people are talking about it, people are saying these things. There are some things, positive things happening. I don't want to dismiss that, but what is it that is keeping the Church of England in this place where it is? Is it elitism, do you think? Is it preservation of power? What is it? Why are we not tapping into this rich well of working class people who can bring so much to our learning and to the church?
I think it's both of the things that you've just stated. I think one of the other things is we've got to recognize that people are not committed to the Church of England anymore. The Church of England is not the only way of doing Christianity. And as you look across the nation, there are some amazing denominations who are growing working class leaders. And what I'm finding is very often where you've got a parish on an estate and they are not thriving, you don't have to look very far to find another church of another denomination who is really thriving and growing leaders from that neighborhood. So what we're finding is working class people are selecting churches that will invest into them. And there are other organizations like the Message Trust in Manchester who are doing an amazing job at resourcing mission on estates. So people are simply moving to there's a pull there. They're moving towards these things, and they're just abandoning the Church of England, because they don't see themselves in it. So we've talked a lot over recent years about diversity, and one of my arguments is, yes, we're looking at diversity in terms of nationality, but we've not really looked at diversity in terms of economic diversity. We've neglected the working class, and now it's coming back to bite us because we don't have them training. There's only 14% in the 2018-19 selection year. Only 14% came from social housing. Now, of course, you're not necessarily working class if you live on social housing, but there's a connection there, and it shows us we're not selecting people. So I think there is just a systemic issue, and I think there's a blindness issue in the Church of England. I also think there is a arrogance that middle class leaders think they can move into working class neighborhoods and be the parish priest and make it work. They just think that, oh, I'll move in, I can do it. And there's almost this savior mentality of, I'm going to move in and save the estate. And I'm trying to whisper to people, I do think you can be on an estate and be middle class and serve it well. I think you can. But you're going to need to learn their language. It's cross-cultural mission. It's contextualization. It's all of that stuff we did when we were taking the gospel internationally. We need to be doing that with our neighborhoods. I think the win is when we have local leaders trained up and we're not importing middle-class leaders into estates.
Yeah,
I think that is controversial. Some people find that really controversial because you're saying middle-class people can't do that kind of mission. No, that's not what I'm saying. I just think you're going to find it really hard.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's an authenticity that comes from urban estates where they'll find you out. If you're not authentic, if you're not prepared to get down into the nitty gritty, get under the skin, under the social issues of the area and the people, then you're on a loser. And you can go there and look wonderful, and you can do say all the right things, but deliver them is very different. Cris, just moving on to this thing about estates, because in your work you write about the idea of the sacred space. That, for example, the council houses of Burnley, Birmingham, and East London are just as sacred as the spaces of Westminster and Jerusalem. I think this is a really pertinent point to be raised. Can you just explain that to us?
Love to. So I'm calling it positive urban theology. So I grew up reading a theology that said about the urban setting, it's a cursed place, it's an abandoned place, or it's a place that's deprived. Now, all of those things are somewhat true. The danger is when your theology is based around a theology of deprivation, you end up seeing that estate in a, well, this is deprived, so we need to bring the riches in. Let's flip that. And let's say, actually, the urban setting is a place with such vitality and life. God is at work here. The incarnation is here. He's at work. The work of the Holy Spirit is here. Can we see these urban environments not as deprived, but with treasures that are buried and need to be found? And actually, they're treasures that are really rich in this place, and that they're treasures that are needed within this place. So can we reframe our neighborhood? So theologically, I've been reflecting on the estate like an Eden. There's a new Eden here, and it has tower blocks, but it's an Eden where God is walking with his people and he's at work in their lives. And therefore, as a minister within my new Eden, I'm looking to find, it's the Missio Dei. God is at work in this place. He is on mission here. I'm partnering with him. I'm not bringing Jesus in. I'm not bringing the gospel in. It's here. And we've just overlooked it and thought we need to bring in a middle-class gospel. So the thing that I've been trying to champion is what I call positive urban theology, where we reframe the inner city as a place that, if we could just see and glimpse the treasures here, and help those within this Eden see the treasures here, then the dream is no longer how do I get out? How do I go somewhere else that will be better? It becomes, this is a place where everything I need is right here. Why don't I stay and continue to see God at work in this place? How do I use the resources here? It's a little bit, reminds me a little bit like Nehemiah rebuilding the city walls. The pictures in Isaiah. Spirit of the Lord is on me, for the purposes of rebuilding these ancient ruins. It's all in this place. Everything that Nehemiah needed to rebuild Jerusalem was in that place. And can we therefore see our estates in the same way, rather than saying, how do we bring resources in? How do we change? It's really celebrating what is in it already. The incarnation helps me with that. The God that moved in, and everything Jesus needed was right there. It was right in the soil. The people he needed were right there. Jesus did not ship people in from Rome to help him on his mission. He found the treasure.
I really love this idea of positive urban theology. I think because there is this perception of reality, isn't there? I think a lot of people who are very wealthy see these places as of places that you just don't want to go. You just don't want to be there. You don't want to meet the people. But the reality of these places is they're not places of hopelessness and failure. They're places of challenge and opportunity. That's the way I kind of see it. And I think there is work to do in turning that ignorance around to people recognizing that these places are diverse, they're full of hope, they're full of humor, incredible humor, Chris, which I'm sure you will
Yeah.
recognize, but also great places of learning, Chris. I learn
Yeah.
off these people things that I just didn't know. I learn about resilience, pride, community, all those things.
They're entrepreneurial.
Mm.
And this is one thing. So I would say my estate is filled full of people who are entrepreneurs. Now they can do that by becoming a painter and decorator, and they set up a little business and they work out, if I could get the paint, I could go around and make some money being a painter and decorator. It was entrepreneurial. Same with electricians. Then you also have those who go, do you know what? If I break an entry into that property, I could get a TV and sell it for 300 quid. That'll go towards the rent. So the entrepreneurialness can go in two directions, something positive and something not. So what I've realized is, gosh, I have some amazing entrepreneurs around here. Could I get them to pivot what they're doing right now towards something positive and kingdom, rather than towards simply burglary? And my answer is, well, yes. And there are members now of my church and congregation who are amazing missionaries on my estate, who once had a dubious past. And we were able to take that entrepreneurial creativity about how they're going to, because life's a hustle. They're hustling through life. Can I help them turn the hustle towards something that's wholesome, helpful for their family? He's not going to put them in prison, and it helps the kingdom of God. And when you're able to do that, take the gifting that is there, but just refocus it towards something else, that's when you're like, wow, the riches here are just incredible.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
I think there's an irony, Chris, around the church where in many places the church is now seen as a place of distrust, a place of controversy. But actually, I find that when you bring in new people to church from the the urban setting, from the estates, they come with a clean slate.
Mm.
And quite often the church is the very rare thing in their lives that they do trust. They don't trust the social security system or the local member of parliament. Did you find that to be the case where
yeah,
you are?
definitely. I would say they distrust the big church C, really trust the local. So what I find is that people will approach us for help because they know that we are committed. I've been here 15 years this summer. They know we're here. They know we've made a commitment. They see the difference that we've made, the care, the interest. And I would say one of the key things for the working class is they don't want your authority. They want your friendship. So if anybody's watching this who's actually moving into an inner city area, I would say don't go in as somebody with authority. Go in as somebody who's going to make friends. That's what they're after. They want your friendship. And therefore, that friendship means that the local church is seen positively rather than the institution, which is seen as very negatively. It's seen as having a lot of money, a lot of resource, a lot of pomp and ceremony. They're not interested in any of that. They're interested in friendship. And therefore, wherever we can dismantle, ourselves, what perceived to be from the institution, um, and to say, no, that we're all about this local neighborhood. They love that. They thrive under that. They knock on my door and ask for help because they know we'll say yes.
And I think we've talked a lot about the working class and the estates, but I think it's important to say something about that. This is not just kind of you and us against you. This needs to be joined up, kind of co-working, doesn't it, Chris? It kind of, that we're not saying that academia is wrong. We're not saying that academics can't help. It's about a relationship, isn't it? What you said there about a place of trust and friendship. I believe the church, if it could solve a lot of its problems if it worked on its challenge over relationships with one another. Just say a bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, it's the whole mixed economy stuff, isn't it? And a couple of things. Number one, just because somebody's working class doesn't mean they can't read books. I mean, I have books. I've collected them. I don't tend to read them very often, but they look really pretty. I do. I've just done my doctorate, so I am a thinker. So for some people, that route is what's needed. There are others who need a more apprenticeship route. That's one of the things I've been really challenging, is saying that actually some folk would thrive with an apprenticeship training model. And so there is not one answer. There's not one solution. And neither do I say that East London only should have working class clergy. No, East London as an area needs clergy of all backgrounds, because East London is a melting pot. And therefore you across the board, you want diversity. And it's just, I grew up in Normanton, West Yorkshire, and Wakefield Diocese. It needed people from different backgrounds coming with different skills and different ideas of ministry. And somehow within that melting pot, it all ends up working out. It's when the working class haven't been adopted, and the working class haven't been trained and haven't been deployed, we have a huge problem, because they're the ones who are able to communicate into the estates. They're the ones that are able to speak the language, contextualize the gospel, and it's contextualized not just in terms of words, it's behavior and language and practice, and it's the whole lot, isn't it?
So in 30 minutes, we've talked a lot, Chris, but try and bring this to some sort of kind of where's it heading? What is it you're asking for? What is it you're calling the church to do next?
I really believe we need to create an apprenticeship training route for priesthood. Yes, there's working class as well. We've got to deal. So lay ministry as well. But I'm thinking about the priesthood. I believe we need an apprenticeship model where those that want to be trained in that model can do that. And I believe that model isn't one that will take 3 years. It takes longer. A good apprenticeship scheme does not take 3 years. It takes between 6 and 9 years. And often those last 3 years are a relationship with somebody where you're not being watched every day, but you have somebody to pick up the phone and call. So I think we need to look at a model where we can take working class folk and apprentice them like you would apprentice a plumber, an electrician, where they're working with a priest day in, day out, and they would be going for a period of an afternoon, not to lectures, but workshops. One of the clear messages that came out in my research was the working class are looking for an apprenticeship model with workshops, not lectures, where we realize that actually there's a lot of learning already in the room. There's life experience in the room. And they have already got an experience that theology and that learning and the leadership skills, the priesthood kind of comes into, meets what they already are aware of and, have already learned in life. And actually in that workshop space, together they can learn rather than it being a didactic lecture. The other thing then is, I think we've got to do away with essays. We've got to ditch the Durham scheme, which is what we've got at the moment. And we need to be looking at building portfolios. So if you were a plumber, you would build a portfolio over a number of years on a number of ways of doing your work. And that, oh, once you've become a plumber, you would then go back to that portfolio, and it's got everything in it that you can keep dipping back to. We need something where people build up a portfolio of work so they know how to do the ministry, they know how to do pastoral ministry, they know how to preach, they know how to do the Eucharist, and it's all in that portfolio. So it's not about getting a grade or a degree or a master's. It's actually about building up a portfolio for work so you can actually be a priest, not an academic who's doing priesthood. Because I think what we're doing at the moment is we're taking Peters and we're making them Pauls. We're forcing them to become like Paul, and we don't need more Pauls. We need more Peters. We need people who can really fish for men, who are in the workplace, in the estates, and they're living and breathing this stuff. So I'm trying to say, look, can we train Peters to be Peters? You've got Pauls who are training to be Pauls over there. Great. But these Peters are really going to do your mission to those neighborhoods in a way that the Pauls couldn't do it.
And this something, Chris, it really is. Can you unite the church? I think. As synod, as a general synod member, I have been through some pretty stormy waters over the last few years on various subjects. But this, I think, is something that can really kind of unite the church, bring us together, and do something positive. I feel very grateful to God that somehow I've come across you, and I feel like I've got a kindred spirit here, and you've so eloquently described what I want to say. The apprenticeship program to me is a quick win. It's a long project, but it's a quick win. It's a way that we can actually tap into the talents, and of course, this you've touched on it there about Peter and Paul. It's theologically robust, isn't it? It stands up. I mean, Jesus called the fishermen, for goodness sake.
Oh, I wish we had more time. I'd love to explore with you the language that Jesus used around discipleship, because our New Testaments are written in Greek, but we know Jesus didn't speak Greek. And if we start to explore the words of Jesus in the Aramaic, it's radically different. And the word that Jesus uses for discipleship in the earliest Aramaic texts, that word tamadin is only ever used outside of the New Testament in other literature to do with the apprenticeship of craftsmen. So my big argument is Jesus uses working class language, and when he calls people to be disciples, the language is, would you become craftsmen and women of the kingdom of God? He doesn't say come and be a disciple in terms of an academic learner. The Aramaic shows us that Jesus is using working class language to call working class people. And in Mark 8, when Jesus says, go, if you want to be a apprentice, pick up your cross and follow me. It's like he's saying, pick up the tools of the kingdom and follow me. And once you tune into the working class language in the New Testament, particularly the Gospel of Mark, it's just riddled with working class language around apprenticeship, training, craftsmanship, crafting the kingdom. So I'd love to have that's a whole nother piece of my research. How does Jesus talk about leadership development? How did he talk about discipleship? And it's quite clear to me that Jesus does not use methetes. That is the Greek word. He used talmudin, and it really is only ever translated as an apprentice. So that's where I'm taking that from. If Jesus apprenticed his disciples, and the language in the Aramaic was attached to craftsmen of particular work, could we have a training route that was training men and women as apprentices to the craft of the kingdom of God?
Yeah. Well, Chris, it's more than 30 minutes now. It's absolutely flown by because for me, it's stuff that really floats my boat. It's fascinating stuff. I'm pleased to say that I think people are listening. I've engaged through my role as General Synod. There's a private members motion coming very soon. Are you hopeful? Do you think change will come? And if so, how quickly would you like to see it?
Am I hopeful for the Church of England? I'm not entirely sure. What is my conclusion? I need to get on with it. So even in my parish, I've already made changes in how we go about training people. And I'm already apprenticing people myself. I've already made a choice in who I'm going to train up and who I'm going to focus on and how I prepare them and how I help them through the Church of England. So even if the Church of England doesn't change, which I really pray and hope it does, I need to be the change. I need to be doing this myself. I need to be growing, and I need to be choosing to say to those that I grow in leadership and towards priesthood or lay leadership, I have your back, not for 3 years, 6 years, or 9 years, but I have your back in ministry. And in 20 years' time, we are still going to be mates. We're still going to be doing this together. We might be in different parts of the country, but I have your back. And I think so. I'm choosing to change my posture in seeing how I train people, select people, how I might put them through the discernment process. And then my commitment to them is a longer term commitment as well. So I'm hopeful for the church, but I'm not sure. But therefore, I need to be doing this. That's my sense. So anybody that's watching this that is working class, I would be wanting to say, look, let's champion the church, but let's not make it their responsibility. Let's us take responsibility of making the change happen ourselves. We just need to do this, because even if they don't make a change, we could make a change for someone. And even if it was only ones and twos, it makes a difference to someone in their calling.
Yeah, in my book, we'll plug it.
Yeah.
I finished with a story about starfish, and there's a guy walking along the beach and with his child, and he throws a starfish. There was thousands of starfish on the beach, and he threw one back, and then he threw another one back, and his little girl said to him, "Daddy, what on earth are you doing throwing these starfish back? There's thousands of them. You can't possibly make a difference." To which her daddy replied, "Well, I made a difference to that one,
Mm.
and I made a difference to that one, and I made a difference to that one."
Yeah.
Chris, I think this conversation is so important because I know from the emails and the correspondence that I've received, for too long, too many people have felt that it was them,
Yeah.
that they were the problem, and they're not the problem, are they? Just finish with a word of encouragement, to people, Chris, who think it's them.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I would love to tell you stories of so many people I've met who thought they were the issue. They had to change. They had to change what they wore, how they spoke. And I'd love to just say, looking straight at the camera, it's not you. Do not change. We need you to be you, because you are that unique key that will connect with somebody who is working class. And if you change and become middle class to fit the Church of England, that individual over there will not be reached. So we need to stay as we are. And one of the things that I've been doing the last couple of years is I've almost been regressing away from who I had become to try and fit the institution. And I've been regressing back to my true self. My accent's been slipping back. My choice of clothing has changed. I often wear my Ghostbusters t-shirts now, my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirts. What I grew up wearing as a working class lad. I'm retracting back to my old self, because I'm like, no, I need to be me. Don't be somebody you are not, so you think you would fit an institution. The institution needs to match you, because you have a call to reach the lost.
I just applaud you, Chris. I can only echo that. I feel like I'm regressing. I have tattoos, and I used to hide them away, but no more. I've done it too long, and I'm gonna, as you have said, this has become a big thing for me, and it's not gonna be a 6-week enterprise. It's gonna be a 6-year, 6 decade till God calls me home. This is important stuff for the church, and I'm very grateful for you to come in on the Godcast to talk about it.
Pleasure. Can I just mention? So what I did with all my research, I thought it would sit on a shelf and be useless. If I stick it on a website somewhere, then people can find it and they can then use it themselves in whatever arguments they want to make. So I created urbanmission.uk, and that's where all my research data has gone. And it's not a blog. It's not somewhere I'm going to keep adding lots of stuff. There will be a few things that will go on there down the line. But what I'm trying to do is create a space where data is, and that if anybody needs to use that data or needs encouragement that there are others, then that space is there for anyone who might find that helpful. So that was urbanmission.uk.
That's great, and that's on my Twitter feed as well, if anybody wants to link to it there. But Chris, thanks so much. We send love from Lancashire to London, and once again, thanks for coming on. Thank you.
Grace and peace.